Welcome back to my training series entitled Understanding EMV. We are currently in the final part of section 2, and in this video we will be looking at key concepts and terminology around the basics of acquiring. So let's get straight into it. Okay, what is acquiring? So in banking terms, acquiring is the processing of card transactions to provide merchants with the ability to retrieve money from a customer's bank account in lieu of goods or services. What this basically means is that the merchant will route all transactions on their card terminals, deposit devices, or online shopping portal to a bank called an acquirer or acquiring bank. Now, if the merchant will have a merchant agreement with his acquiring bank, it's a legal contract stipulating the conditions and the costs of this bank collecting and routing all transactions processed on the POS device of this merchant. As part of this contract, the bank will pass these transactions on to the relevant issuing banks, and obviously they will charge the merchant a fee for the service. To simplify things, for the purpose of this training course, okay, let's just say that acquiring revolves around terminals, and specifically terminals that facilitate EMV transactions. Okay. You'll notice as I progress that I have included ATMs in this section. Okay. And the reason for it is simply that the ATM is also an EMV card acceptance device. Okay. So there are some technical elements that I would like to touch on, but you should bear in mind that as a general rule, ATMs don't fall within the acquiring business of a bank. Okay. I've only included it because we just need to touch on some of the technical aspects of it. So let's kick straight off into what is a POS device. Okay, so a POS, which stands for point of sale device, is a device situated at a merchant to process payments for goods or services purchased. Right. This device interacts with payment cards, and therefore it must be capable of processing whichever technology is available. So if it's a MaxStripe card, it must be able to process a MaxStripe transaction, and if it's an EMV card, it must be able to process an EMV transaction. As a general rule, these devices can be broadly categorized into two distinct types. Okay, you get a standalone device and you get an integrated device. So a standalone device or a standalone POS, usually you'll find these at your small little corner shops, your small little one-shop businesses, where the merchant will secure a device from the acquiring bank, okay, or from a third-party vendor, right? Generally, these POS devices are not integrated into the shop's till system, okay, and the device actually, if it's not purchased outright by the merchant, could actually belong to the acquiring bank, which the merchant rents or leases over a period of time. In contrast, we find the integrated POS device, and usually these are built into in-store till systems with a card acceptance or PED device attached to it. These devices are generally owned by the merchant, so they buy these devices directly, and they have their own IT department setting them up, with the software being developed in-house. Okay, and so the type of merchant who would have an integrated POS device would be your large-scale, franchise outlets, etc. ATMs. Okay, so I'm sure we are all familiar with ATMs. And what is an ATM? It stands for automated teller machine, and it's basically a banking terminal, right, which allows customers to do key transactions without the need of having to go into a branch and stand in the queue and deal with a human being. Right. Using an ATM, customers can access the bank accounts, and they can do so to check account balances. They can make cash withdrawals, deposit cash, do inter-account transfers, or purchase airtime or electricity, etc. Right. If you work in the card industry, there's going to come a time when you are going to be sitting in a meeting and people are going to be talking about terminal types. The techies are very fond of this. You'll sit in a session and they'll be explaining how a particular card transaction type seems to be working fine on a type 2 terminal, or sorry, a type 22 terminal, but they're having issues on a type 14 terminal. Okay, and I mean, so when these techies speak of a type 22 terminal or type 14 terminal, what do they actually mean by this? Okay, so there is a standard way of defining terminals in the card industry, and it's controlled by this table that you see in front of you. Okay, the table is broadly split into four quadrants, right? So your first column speaks to the environment, and this is broken up into two horizontal swim lanes. So you've got the environment, which could either be attended or unattended. Okay, and under attended or unattended, you'll see that you specify, is the device online only, is it offline and online capable, or is it offline only? Okay. The next component you have to look at is who provides operational control to the device. Now, operational control refers to who maintains the device. If the device goes down, who's responsible for unplugging it from the power, plugging it back in, trying to boot it up, performing supervisor functions on it, etc. Right? So under this column, you'll find that it's further broken up into three subcolumns. Okay. So operational control, is it provided by the financial institution? Is it provided by the merchant? Or is it provided by the cardholder? So I think the easiest way for us to explain this is to actually work through examples. So let's have a look at the first example, a branch terminal. Now, a branch terminal, if you've been in a branch, if you've collected a card from a bank branch, you'll know that when the card is handed to you, they would normally ask you to choose a pin, and you take your card and you'd insert it into a device which looks very similar to a POS, right? And so these are branch terminals, which we also call TVTs, right? So let's look at a branch terminal, right? So a branch terminal, if you look at the environment, is it attended or unattended? Now, generally speaking, these devices are controlled by a branch consultant or a branch attendant, right? So we know it's attended. And in most cases, these devices tend to be online only. So this narrows our search, right? So we know now that the terminal type for a TVT lies in the first swim lane in the first row. Okay, let's look at the operational control. So who provides operational control of this device? That's fairly obvious, right? So the bank will do that. It's situated on the bank premises. They supply power, they supply connectivity, they maintain it and fix it when it's broken, right? So the financial institution is the entity responsible for operational control. So we know that horizontally it's an attended online only device. So our options are 11 and 21, and we know that operational control is provided by the financial institution. So if you run down this column, you'll see that we arrive at the number 11. So a branch terminal, in the example I've used, should be a terminal type 11. Hey, guess what? We've got it right. All right, so let's look at another example. A POS terminal. So let's look at the most commonly deployed POS terminal in the market today. So we are going to find it in a shop, and generally we're going to find it at the till where there is a teller available or attending to it. So we know that it's in the shop, but it is attended, and most POS terminals are capable of both online and offline capability. So we know that the POS terminal type falls within row 2. So it's either a type 12 or type 22 device. Okay. Now if you look at the operational control, once again, obvious that the merchant provides operational control. Okay, so if the terminal breaks or it needs to be restarted or needs to be fixed, it's the merchant who will handle this and get a technician to come in and sort it out, or will reboot it or restart it or conduct supervised activities on it. So if you run down the column, of the two options, 12 and 22, we see we've intersected at 22. So 22 is generally the terminal type for normal POS terminal, right? Yay, we got it right again. ATMs. Okay. Are ATMs attended or unattended? We know that they're unattended. You're not supposed to have anyone there assisting with an ATM for security reasons. So it's unattended, and ATMs generally tend to be online only. So we know that we are looking at the first row in the second swim lane. So it's either terminal type 14, 24, 34. And we know that operational control is always provided by the bank. Right? So even though the ATM may be situated, within the mall or within the shop, no maintenance work is ever done by any party other than the bank. So operational control always provided on ATMs by the financial institution. So if you scroll down, we intersect at terminal type 22, at terminal type 14, and we are correct. All right, let's have a look at one more example. A vending machine. So let's assume our vending machine is in a mall somewhere, and it's online only. So we know it's unattended. We know that it's online only. So it's got to be a terminal type 14, 24, or 34. Right? Operational control will be provided by the merchant who stocks it, who fills it with chips and with chocolates and with cold drinks. So we're seeing the point of intersection being here. So a vending machine in the example we've used will generally be a terminal type 24. Once again, we are correct. We are too good. Right. So now it brings us to this bottom right-hand corner. Okay, where we have a 34, 35, or 36 terminal type. So these are the weird stuff. Right. These are terminal types that you would normally attribute to things like a personal computer or payphone or a digital interactive television or a set-top box. Okay, so it's a stuff that that's in your house that you can conduct transactions on, but it's under your control as the card holder, right? And we're not going to touch too much on this during the course of this training. We will try to focus as much as we can on a terminal type 22 over the course of this training series. Okay, let's talk a bit about terminal flow limits now. Terminal flow limits are transaction value limits that we load on a terminal, which prevents transactions which have a value over these limits from being approved offline. Okay? In other words, at the merchant level, we will determine what we deem to be acceptable risk in terms of being able to complete offline transactions. So let's just say that in my store, my terminal has a flow limit of 300 Rand, which means I'm only comfortable with approving transactions offline, without getting approval from the bank, as long as the value is under 300 Rand. So we will set a terminal flow limit of 300 Rand on the device, and any transaction greater than the 300 Rand will be required to go online and obtain issue approval for the transaction. Okay. In the magstripe world, flow limits were very, very important. Okay. At the time, this was the only risk management measure available, okay, to control whether a transaction could complete offline or if it needed to be sent online for host authorization. Now, things have changed, things have moved on, we've evolved. So during an EMV transaction, we still do terminal flow limit processing, but it's important to note that it's not the only risk management that the terminal will now do. It is one of many risk management processes that we will discuss during the EMV transaction. Okay. We're going to move on now to types of transactions. Okay. And when I talk of types of transactions, please bear with me. I don't mean a purchase or cash withdrawal or refund, etc. Yes, you are correct. These are types of transactions. But what I really mean here is transaction patterns. And the transaction patterns we're going to be looking at are offline transactions, online transactions, us on us transactions, us on them transactions, and believe it or not, them on us transactions. So let's get straight into the offline transactions. Let's look at an offline transaction, and we're looking at this in the dual messaging world. Okay, so let's we have Bob, and Bob needs to buy a pair of socks. So Bob goes to the sock shop, and he picks up a pair of socks with a very fancy hot dog pattern on it, and checks the price. He says it's 100 rand. Bob says, "Excellent! I've got 500 rand in my account balance. I can do this." So he goes to the teller. He hands the sock over for processing. The teller rings it up, and the teller asks Bob, "Mr. Bob, how would you like to pay?" So Bob says, "I'm going to pay with my credit card, of course." So the teller presents the POS device to Bob. Bob will insert his chip credit card into the POS device. The transaction value is 100 Rand. Now, the sock shop has a terminal flow limit of, let's say, 300 Rand. So, and let's ignore any other risk management. So let's only look at terminal flow management for the purpose of the scenario. So we know that 100 Rand is less than the flow limit. So in theory, the transaction could complete offline because we haven't exceeded the flow limit. And that's what happens, right? So between the card and the POS device, the transaction of 100 Rand is approved. Okay. Now the scary thing is this. Bob receives his socks, he's on his way out, he's walking out of the store, he's got a receipt saying that he paid for his goods. But at this point in time, the issuing bank, so assume that Bob banks with Bank ABC. Bank ABC at this point in time does not know that Bob has spent 100 Rand on socks, right? So as far as the issuing bank is concerned, Bob has 500 Rand available for him to spend, okay? But really, Bob has, spent 100 Rand on that on socks, so he should only have 400 Rand. So, I mean, the obvious implications are, the possibility that offline transactions could allow for customers to spend beyond what the account balance actually allows. And this happens on a regular basis. It's part and parcel of the card landscape, where offline transactions are supported, which is why we have flow limits to minimize how much of overspend actually happens, right? So when will Bank ABC, when will the issuing bank actually come to know about this? So, historically, because of the cost of telecoms, uh, POS devices and merchants would bank, or they would batch themselves once a day. So let's assume that the sock shop closes at 5 p.m. every day. Around about 10 past 5, while the manager's cashing up and sweeping up and packing stock on the shelves, the terminal would go into batch mode. It would sort of pull together all of the transactions for the day, and it would send off settlement advices to the acquiring bank, okay, to be passed on to the issuing bank. So, and these settlement advices, and we will speak a bit more about these 220 messages later as you progress through the training. These would route up, and it was only at this point that the issuing bank actually became aware that a transaction was performed and that Bob's balance isn't actually 500 Rand, it's actually 400 Rand, right? What you find these days, with the cost of telecoms, dropping, it is cheaper to send more transactions online. So you wouldn't necessarily have a single batch event at the end of the day. You could have the terminal set up that every time the transaction every time the terminal had to send a transaction online, it would bundle those settlement advices uh, along with that message. Okay, so those settlement messages would reach the issuing banks, throughout the course of the day, and this could be a few seconds after the transaction, minutes or hours, right? And in some instances, settlement could even happen if the terminal still relies on a single batch event. Uh, you could find that if there were connectivity issues, that this batching or banking may not happen same day, and it could only happen, a day or 2 or 3 days later, right? And all this is perfectly acceptable within the card landscape. Okay, but the end result is this: once that banking event or batching event or settlement advices have been sent through, it's at this point only that the issuing bank is actually aware that an offline transaction took place. Okay, let's move on to online transactions. So online transactions, same example. Bob is at the sock shop. Uh, he's now buying 4 pairs of socks at 100 Rand each, which is a total value of 400 Rand. We know the flow limits are 300. So in this case, the POS says, hey man, there's no way we can confirm this transaction ourselves. We have to send the transaction up to Big Brother. Let the issuing bank let us know whether we may approve this transaction. And so that's what happens, right? The POS device will generate the ISO 8583 message. It will send it up to the acquiring bank. The acquiring bank will pass it on to the issuing bank. The issuing bank says, hey, Bob wants to buy stocks to a value of 400 Rand. His account balance is actually 500 Rand. So we're good to go. We're happy with this, right? So in real time, Bank ABC or the issuing bank is aware that the transaction is taking place. And when it responds, it will respond back to the POS device saying, all is good, approved transaction, give Bob his stocks. Okay, but at the same time, what happens is the issuing bank will reserve 400 Rand of the balance. So even though at this point in time, Bob will still have an account balance of 500 Rand, he will now have an available account balance of only 100 Rand. 400 Rand will be reserved because the bank was notified as part of the authorization request uh, that a transaction was processed for this amount. Okay, later that evening, settlement will still occur, or it could happen over the course of the day. These are the 220 messages coming up, and at this point in time, all of the data is in place, all the information is available for the funds to actually be debited off Bob's account, and this could happen in real time, or this could happen, as part of the batch process later that night. Okay, but the important thing to know is that in an online transaction, the issuer knows immediately that a transaction is taking place and the funds have been reserved, which then adjust the available funds. Okay. Now let's look at us on us transactions. And let's look at the scenario of an online transaction so we can sort of follow the us on us transaction flow from end to end. When you talk of us on us transactions, the first pronoun refers to the card of the issuer. The second us or second pronoun refers to the terminal or the acquirer, right? So what we are saying here, an us on us transaction means that it is our card on our terminal or our cardholder at our merchant. So let's assume we work for Bank ABC. Bob is a Bank ABC cardholder. Okay, so he's our customer. And so when Bob goes to the sock shop with his Bank ABC card, our card, and he processes a transaction, it so happens that the sock shop has a merchant agreement with Bank ABC. So Bob has a relationship with the issuing department of Bank ABC, and the sock shop has a merchant agreement or relationship with the acquiring division of Bank ABC, right? So when the transaction is processed, the terminal will send the transaction to the switch of Bank ABC. Bank ABC will have a look at the bin and say, hey man, the bin is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We know this bin belongs to us. So what the switch will do is it will route the transaction to the host system of Bank ABC, and the transaction will be responded back down the same stream. Okay, fairly straightforward. So let's look now at us and them transactions. And once again, online transactions, just so we can follow the stream correctly. So the first us we said is the card or the card holder, and the second pronoun, in this case them, is the device of the merchant. So what we're saying is it's our card on another bank's terminal, our card holder at another bank's merchant, right? So once again, we've got Bob with his Bank ABC card, and he's now buying shoelaces at the shoelace store. The shoelace store has a merchant agreement with Bank XYZ. Okay, so Bank XYZ is the acquirer for the shoelace store. So when the transaction is processed, and Bob is buying a lot of shoelaces, right? So we've exceeded the terminal flow limit. The transaction is going online. The POS will generate the authorization request message, and it will send it to its acquiring bank, which is the switching system of Bank XYZ. Bank XYZ looks at the bin on the transaction and says, hey, it's bin 123456. This bin does not belong to us, okay? But we know it belongs to Bank ABC. But we don't have a direct connection to Bank ABC. So what Bank XYZ will do is that it will route this transaction, or this message rather, to the national or international switch, right? The national or international switch will receive the transaction message, and it will look at the bin and say, hey man, it's Bank 123456. We know this bin. This bin belongs to Bank ABC. So the national switch will then route the transaction to Bank ABC switch. Bank ABC switch will say, we know bin 123456. It belongs to us. So it will route the transaction to Bank ABC's host system. And the transaction, once responded to, will return back along the same flow. Okay, fairly straightforward, right? Okay, so let's move very quickly into the last scenario, which is demonas transactions. So we are experts at this now. First pronoun, dem, refers to the card holder or the card, and the second pronoun, which is us, refers to the terminal of the merchant. So what we are saying is we have another bank's card on our bank's terminal, or another bank's card holder at our bank's merchant. So remember, we are Bank ABC. We work for Bank ABC. Sally decides that Sally is Bob's girlfriend, and Sally wants to buy socks for Bob because Bob just never has enough socks, right? So Sally is a card holder with Bank XYZ, right? And Sally goes to the sock shop and she purchases 5 pairs of socks for Bob, and processes the transaction on the terminal at the sock shop. Now, we know that the sock shop is acquired by us, by our bank, by Bank ABC, right? So what will happen is the POS will generate the ISO 8588 message, and it will route it to Bank ABC switching system. Bank ABC switching system will have a look at the bin and say, uh-oh, the bin is 456789. This is not our bin. So we can't do anything with this. We need to route this message off to the issuing bank. And we know that the issuing bank for this bin is Bank XYZ, so we need to send it there. But we don't have a direct connection to Bank XYZ. So what we'll do instead is we'll send it to the national switch or the international switch. The national switch looks at the bin and says, bin 456789, this belongs to Bank XYZ. It will send the transaction to the switching system of Bank XYZ. Bank XYZ switch will say, we know this bin, it belongs to us. And so it will send the transaction to Bank XYZ's host system. The host system will approve the transaction, and the response will return back to the terminal following the same path. Okay, so that was fairly straightforward. I look forward to catching you guys in the next video. So take care and all the best.